Okay, so this will be for hardium. I'm going to very quickly try to make the crate. First thing I'm going to do, press 6, open your layer menu, and then press layers, new layer, name this layer clone. This is because we're going to be symmetrically modeling and we want our clone to go in that layer. You can click this tab on the side here to switch your layers at any time. Green means it's selected. Layer default is where we're going to create our first cube. And we are just going to go to the menu shelf here, primitives cube, or you can go models, primitive, polygon mesh, and down to cube. So create your cube. We're going to want its length to be about 4. I'm going to go ahead now and swap my viewport into shaded so that I'm able to see it more clearly. I'm going to make one subdivision along the U line and one subdivision along the base line to give me this. This is because we are actually going to be symmetrically modeling, and we are going to make it so that a clone does all 4 of these sides. I'm going to select this side here using the U key and then clicking, and then rotate down. I'm going to select the bottom. I'm going to go over here to the select button, select, invert using filter. That'll select all other polygons, and click delete. That is going to cause just this little shape here. This is what we're going to be cloning. I'm going to go to the bottom here, select it with the U key, or U and then click. Click this over here to bring up your translation tab. This will make sure that it is in global. Click global. So make sure your Y translation is at -2. Bring it to 0. This will make sure that your mesh is nice and flat along the bottom. Now, with that all done, what we are going to now do is we are going to press 6, swap into the clone layer so that our new clone is made into this layer. We want to go edit, duplicate and instantiate, clone single. Now, to not get it confused, press enter, and we are going to name this cube clone, just so that we know which one is the clone. And now I'm going to go model, polymesh, symmetrize polygons, and this is because I know I want it to be symmetrical along the global x-axis side to side, and I'm going to set a welding distance of 0.001 so that my points in the middle here are welded. I'm going to do this again, symmetrizing along the global z-axis, and same thing, 0.001, so that it is symmetric along the z-axis here. Now what I'm going to do is, if I go back and I make this clone cube unselectable, I can now go into layer default, select my original cube here, and any edits that I make along the cube will be reflected in the clone. I'm going to go U, and I'm going to drag this forward, because I want that to be a little bit longer to make the crate. Drag this up. Now, it actually tapers along the bottom, so I'm going to drag this backwards along the z-axis, and this along the x-axis to make a nice equal taper. That looks about good enough. I'm going to select this, Control D, bring it up. Control D will extrude it so that I can make a face like this. I'm going to press E, select my edge, move it over along the x-axis, select this edge, move it over along the z-axis to create a nice taper along the edge there. I'm now going to take this edge, and one of the things I'm going to show you real quick, if I go 6, make my clone layer no longer visible. Actually can drag my clone into the clone layer. Make my clone layer no longer visible. These points where I extruded are now created. This is going to create an uneven edge face, so I'm going to press U, and I'm going to delete these to maintain a clean topology. I'm now going to go and make my clone layer visible, not selectable, and I'm going to select this top face, and I want to draw a even line around the base of the edge here. So I'm going to press backslash so that I can draw my edges. So Control and Shift to snap it to the grid, and this will make a nice even line here. I'm going to again make an even line about equidistant from there. Control Shift, make sure that it's an even line. I'm now going to select just this poly face, Control D, drag it down, and you'll notice we get these uneven edges again, and it's kind of ruining our topology, so we're just going to select those. Now this is where it's going to get a little wonky. Sometimes you'll get floating points, you just have to select them with the Y key, delete them. In this case we don't. I'm going to take this to make sure that it's perfectly triangulated. Polymesh, weld point tool, weld this over here. So now with the top here, I'm going to select this with the U key, and I'm going to go Model, Polymesh, Slice Polygons. I want 4 equal distant polygons, so I'm going to slice it along the Z-axis, put number of slices as 3, and distribute my slices evenly to get a nice even slice. I'm going to select each of these individually, and as I select them, I'm going to hit Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D. Now I'm going to select all of these at once, scale it, but make sure that local is selected. And this way, as I scale them, they are scaling evenly together. Now I'm going to create a taper here by selecting these 4 edges, and same thing. I'm going to scale it equally, making sure that local is highlighted, and bring it down to about there. Now, I'm going to select these edges, drag them over slightly to create that nice little groove that we get in the middle. And now I'm going to hit Control D, and you can see where that goes. Now, along the x-axis, I'm going to put that at 0, and that should weld it perfectly. Now I'm going to select all of those points that I just created, and I actually notice here that I have one small unequal distance. We will fix that later. Control D. I'm going to bring this up, and now we have that nice little base groove. Now we still have the back face that we had in the original. We're just going to make the clone invisible for a second, and we are going to delete these 4 back faces to give ourselves a nice clean topology. Now we want to do the front. All that we are going to do for the front is make mostly equal line like that, mostly equal line over like that. Select this, Control D. We are going to now scale this slightly along the Z-axis, slightly along this axis, and I am now going to, sorry, I actually screwed that up, so I'm going to go Control Z. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw another 2 equidistant edges here to, again, that's backslash Control Shift, to make sure that I get the nice little barrier that I usually get. Bring that back, delete, and then down here I'm going to want to delete, go to the bottom face, delete, and this is where things get a little bit weird, so I'm actually going to want to create a hole that I can cap. I'm going to grab this edge, Control D, Z, global 0, grab this point by pressing T, Model, Polymesh, Weld Point Tool, weld this point to here, and now I'm going to select that point again, using the T key, Model, Polymesh, and we are going to, sorry, I forgot that this is mod tool, so we actually don't have cap hole, so we are going to do this the hard way. Edge select, grab these 2 edges, Control D, move it slightly backward, Control D, okay. It is being stubborn. Press Control D on one of the blue edges, bring it forward, Model, Polymesh, Weld Point Tool. It's going to be a little tedious. Back here, same thing, weld it, Model, Polymesh, Weld Point Tool. And then we just have one more hole to cap. Control D. Drag it out. I can grab the point from behind here. That should seal it off nicely and give us that nice little indent right here. I'm going to now grab these 2 edges, Control D, I'm going to extrude them outwards slightly. I'm going to hide my clone again and just delete this so that it's even along my topology. Make my clone visible one more time. Now down here, we want to create an edge that is roughly equal in height to these points here. So I'm going to go about here and draw it to about here. I'm going to select this, and I want one nice little gap about like that. Again, I'm going to go model polymesh, slice polygons along the z-axis. I want number of slices to be 4, and distribute my 3 and distribute my slices evenly. Select each of these, Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D. Select all of them together, scale it, make sure that you're scaling locally, scale it down, grab these edges, and scale these again. I'm now going to grab all 4 of these again, Control D to extrude, and I'm going to extrude it along the x-axis. And that is basically all that we are doing. Now, for this part, we can press Control D, drag this out slightly, and now I'm going to go model, polymesh, one point tool, and I'm just going to weld all these points out to here to create a nice little tapered bottom. Like that. And you can kind of see the shape that we got going here. Now, with that done, I'm going to go to my clone layer, make it selectable, select my clone, edit operator, freeze operator stack, and that makes it so that the clone is no longer bound to a cube. I'm going to press the 8 key, press S to return to scene mode, press my cube, select this, and now I can delete it, and this will be on its own. I'm going to select all these top face pieces now. So, Control D, bring them down along the y-axis to create that nice little curve. I'm now going to go ahead and create, well, this needs to probably be scaled a little bit more, be a little bit wider, create a new cube, make it about 1, because we won't see the back face of this cube, because it will be about here. I'm going to drag this out. I'm going to delete the back face, select the bottom face again, make sure that I'm in global, make sure that my Y value is 0 to make sure it is perfect with the ground. I'm now going to drag it backwards and upwards so that I can make sure that it seems relatively perfectly aligned. And I'm now going to drag it backwards again and scale it along the x-axis so that I can make sure that roughly 4 of them can fit here. I'm now going to go polymesh, slice polygons. Number of slices 2, spacing I'm going to say 5% to start. 5% actually seems pretty good, so I'm going to keep it there. Model, polymesh, slice polygons. This time I'm going to go along the y-axis, number of slices 2, try 5% again, too much, 2%. I'm going to go 1.75%, just to make sure it's relatively equal with the other cross. Now I'm going to zoom in here, press backslash to do my add edge tool, and I'm going to Control Shift to make a relatively perfect circular shape along here. Now, with all of these selected, including the sides and the top, I am now going to hit Control D. I'm going to scale it equally, globally at the center of gravity, or cog, and just make sure that it has a nice little indentation to it. This here, I'm going to select just the circle, Control D, and again scale center of gravity, global, and now I'm going to, after it's scaled like this, hit Control D one more time, and bring it forward along the z-axis to be just a little bit forward of that. I'm now going to press space, I am going to drag this all the way over to the left, and I can see that it needs to be scaled a little bit more along the x-axis to fit 4 of them. So now Control D, set it to be relatively equal distance, relatively equal distance. Does not need to be perfect, it is for a modding project, nobody's going to judge you. Drag those into position. And now finally, we just need to get these over to the back of our z-axis face. So we're going to go Model, Polymesh, Symmetrize Polygons, Global Reference Plane, and Z-axis. Make sure that you disable welding, as we will not need it in this particular case. Finally, I'm going to select these 4, plus this mesh, Model, Polymesh, Merge, set tolerance to 0, delete your reference models, and you can rename this Crate instead of Polymesh. If you look inside your scene now, Crate is the only object left, and you are done.